At 9:15 on a Monday morning, my stepfather fired me in front of my own mother. He called me baggage. Not family, not his son, just baggage she brought with her. But the part that broke me wasn't the firing. It was watching my mother sit beside him, twisting her wedding ring, saying nothing. He thought he had stolen my $9 million bonus by firing me one day early. 1 hour later, the company lawyer opened the contract he had signed and went pale. "Please tell me they paid him already," he said. That visitor badge stayed with me longer than the insult did. It wasn't just plastic clipped to my jacket. It was proof that people can use you for years, profit from your work, smile at your dinner table, and still call you an outsider the moment you stop being convenient. Before we get into what happened next, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Because by the end of this story, that gray visitor badge they pinned on my jacket would cost him everything. I knew something was wrong before I reached the elevators. The receptionist at Callaway Meridian Holdings usually greeted me by name. That morning, she looked at the marble floor and said, "Good morning, Mr. Durst," like the words had been handed to her by legal. 2 analysts stopped talking when I walked past. One of them pretended to check his phone. The other turned toward the glass wall like downtown Dallas had suddenly become fascinating. Then my phone buzzed. Urgent meeting. Conference room C. 9:15. Ah, monsieur. No agenda. No signature. No explanation. Right below it sat another reminder from payroll. Executive equity vesting scheduled tomorrow. $9 million. Not a gift. Not luck. 19 years of missed birthdays. Late flights. Hospital calls answered from boardrooms, and deals I had dragged across the finish line while everyone else was home eating dinner. I should have gone straight to my office. Instead, I walked slower. When a company is about to hurt you, the building tells on itself. Conference room C sat at the far end of the executive floor. On the way there, I passed the framed family photo from the company's 50th anniversary. Murdaugh Callaway in the center, my mother beside him. Chandler, his son, standing proudly on the other side. I was at the edge of the picture, half shadowed by a plant. That had always been my place. When I was 14, my mother married Murdaugh and moved us into his house. He never raised a hand to me. He did something quieter, colder. He taught me where I was allowed to stand. At Christmas photos, he'd say, "Dylan, move over a little." At dinners, he'd introduce Chandler as my son and me as Sherry's boy. Small cuts, clean ones. The kind nobody else sees bleeding. I pushed open the conference room door. Karen Boone from HR sat with a folder in front of her. Murdaugh was at the head of the table, hands folded, silver hair perfect, expression calm. My mother sat beside him. She didn't look up. That told me more than Karen's folder ever could. "Dylan," Karen began, voice soft enough to insult both of us. "Thank you for coming on short notice." "I don't think I had much choice," I said. Murdaugh's mouth tightened. Karen read from the page. "Restructuring. Role elimination. Effective immediately. Standard transition package. Company property to be returned before leaving." I listened until she finished. Then I asked, "For the record, is this termination without cause?" Karen blinked. "Yes. The packet states without cause." Murdaugh gave a dry little laugh. Still trying to sound important? I turned to him. "Why today?" He leaned back, finally enjoying himself. "Because I'm done pretending," he said. "You're not my son. You're just baggage your mother brought with her." The room went still. I looked at my mother. Not for help. Not exactly. Maybe for one word. One raised hand. One breath that said, "Enough." She stared at the table and twisted her wedding ring. That hurt worse than what he said. Karen cleared her throat and held out her hand. "Your badge, please." I unclipped my executive badge and placed it on the table. She slid a gray visitor pass toward me. Visitor. That single word sat there like a final verdict. I clipped it to my jacket, slowly, carefully. Murdaugh watched me, waiting for anger. Tears. A scene he could use later. I gave him none of it. I stood, picked up my briefcase, and walked out. Everyone expected me to head for the parking garage. Instead, I turned toward the executive elevator, toward legal, toward the one contract Murdaugh had laughed at years ago. when he signed every page without reading it. As the elevator doors closed, I touched the folder inside my briefcase and wondered whether the man who had just erased me remembered what he had signed. The elevator moved upward so quietly it felt almost staged. I watched the floor numbers climb and kept my hand on the side of my briefcase. Inside was the contract nobody in that conference room had mentioned. Not Karen, not Murdaugh, not my mother. That was the first real mistake they made. Murdaugh had always believed power meant speaking last. In his house, that usually worked. In his company, people laughed at jokes that were not funny and nodded at ideas they did not believe in. I learned early that men like him do not need to shout when everyone is already trained to agree. But contracts are different. Contracts do not care who owns the corner office. The elevator doors opened on 45, and the legal floor smelled like printer toner and coffee left too long on a warmer. A few associates looked up from their desks. One of them froze when he saw the gray visitor badge clipped to my jacket. News travels fast in corporate life. Bad news runs. Aaron Syed stepped out of his office before I reached it. He was in his late 30s, sharp, careful, the kind of lawyer who read footnotes because he knew someone had hidden a knife there. "Dylan," he said quietly, "I heard there was a meeting." "There was." His eyes dropped to the badge. "That bad?" "Worse." I closed his office door behind me and set the leather folder on his desk. He did not touch it at first. "Aaron," I said, "do you remember Clause 11C? His face changed just a little. Not fear yet. Recognition. That was in your executive amendment, right? I nodded. The one approved after the Keystone acquisition. He opened the folder. Inside were the original agreement, every amendment, the board authorization, and the signed compensation schedule. I had not carried them around for drama. I kept copies because 4 years earlier, pneumonia had put me in a hospital bed for 9 days, and I learned something there. Loyalty is a nice speech. Paper is protection. Back then, Murdaugh wanted me to stay through a brutal acquisition cycle. I agreed, but I added protection against last-minute games around vesting. The language was plain. If the company terminated me without cause, within 24 hours of a scheduled equity event, the payout accelerated. Penalties attached. Arbitration limits shifted. Legal costs rolled forward. Nothing secret, nothing hidden. Murdaugh signed it while joking. Only lawyers and scared men read this stuff. I remembered smiling then. I was not scared. I was prepared. Aaron read the clause once, then again. Then he sat down slowly, like his knees had decided before his mind did. "They terminated you today?" "Yes." "Without cause?" I asked Karen to confirm it on the record. She did. He stared at the page. "Please tell me they paid you already." There it was, the first crack in the wall. I shook my head. They thought firing me before tomorrow solved their problem. Aaron pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. No, that does not solve it. That activates it." He pulled his calculator closer, then opened a spreadsheet on his laptop. He asked for the exact time of termination. I gave it to him. 9:22 a.m. He asked for the vesting time. Midnight. He checked the compensation schedule, the multiplier language, the benefits continuation clause, and the bad faith trigger. His mouth tightened. He calculated once, then again, then a third time, with the kind of silence that makes offices feel smaller. "How bad?" I asked. He looked up. "They were trying to avoid 9 million. I know. If this holds the way I think it does, exposure is closer to 14.9. The words landed clean. No music, no thunder, just math. That was the thing Murdaugh never respected enough. Numbers do not care about pride either. Aaron stood and walked to his door, then paused. "I need Meredith Rowe." "Lead counsel?" "Yes. And I need to issue a preservation notice before anyone gets creative upstairs." "Do it." He looked back at me. "You understand, once this starts, they're going to make it personal." I glanced down at the visitor badge. They already did. Aaron opened his secure email and began attaching files. He copied Meredith, Board Legal Affairs, and Tylee Kessie in compliance. Every signature, every timestamp, every approval record. Before he sent it, he asked, "What are you asking for?" I thought about my mother twisting her wedding ring, Murdaugh smiling when he called me baggage, Karen sliding that gray pass across the table like I had wandered in off the street. "I want the agreement honored," I said. "And I want the record preserved." Aaron nodded once. Then he hit send. A minute later, my phone buzzed. Sender. Board Legal Affairs. Priority. Urgent. I stepped into the hallway and looked down at the badge again. Visitor. An hour ago. It was meant to humiliate me. Now it was evidence that someone very powerful had made a very expensive mistake. I didn't open the board email right there in the hallway. Legal had glass walls, curious eyes, and too many people pretending not to listen. I slid my phone into my pocket, thanked Aaron with a nod, and took the elevator down alone. This time, I didn't head for the parking garage. I walked out through the lobby with that gray visitor badge still clipped to my jacket. A few people saw it. One woman from accounting looked at me, then looked away so fast it was almost kind. Across the street was a small cafe I'd used for years when the office felt too loud. Nothing fancy. Burnt coffee, scratched tables, older men reading the paper like the world still made sense. I took the corner seat by the window, facing the tower I had just been pushed out of. My phone kept buzzing. Missed calls, texts, emails. Funny how people find your name once risk gets attached to it. I opened the message from Board Legal Affairs. Aaron had moved quickly. The email contained a secure file link and a short note. Preliminary documents relevant to your termination review. I entered the access code and began reading. The first attachment was labeled Executive Transition Planning, created 3 weeks earlier. Not yesterday, not after a sudden restructuring. 3 weeks earlier. My name appeared on the first page. Termination logistics, badge deactivation, office collection. Client communication plan, internal announcement, expected emotional response. I stared at that last phrase for a while. Expected emotional response. They had not just planned to fire me, they had planned how I would feel when they did it. I scrolled further. There was a note beside my name. Mother present to reduce escalation. I set the phone flat on the table. The waitress came by and asked if I wanted more coffee. I said yes, though I had not touched the first cup. Mother present. Not, Sherry requested to attend. Not family support. Mother present to reduce escalation. They had used my own mother as furniture in an execution room. That was when old memories started rearranging themselves. Murdaugh telling me to skip board dinners because family optics matter. Karen asking for my org charts 2 weeks ago, smiling like it was just annual planning. Chandler suddenly wanting copies of client transition notes. My mother calling last Sunday and saying, "Honey, whatever happens at work, just remember we all love you." At the time, I thought she was being sentimental. Now I knew she was warning herself, not me. Another attachment opened. A private dinner invite from 16 days earlier. Attendees: Murdaugh Calloway, Karen Boone, Sherry Calloway, Chandler Calloway. Subject: Transition discussion. I read the summary. Dylan timeline. Family messaging. Compensation exposure. I stopped there. Not because I couldn't keep reading, because I understood enough. For most of my adult life, I had made excuses for my mother. She was caught in the middle. She didn't know how cruel he was. She was trying to keep peace. She had survived loneliness before Murdaugh, and maybe security had become her religion. Children will build entire churches around their parents' silence if it helps them sleep at night. Then my phone rang. Mom. I let it buzz twice, 3 times. Then I answered. "Dylan, honey," she said. That word sounded smaller than it used to. "What do you need, Mom?" She exhaled, shaky but controlled. "I just want you to understand this all happened very fast." "No, it didn't." Quiet. I looked across the street at the building. The sun hit the glass, bright enough to hurt. "Were you at a dinner 16 days ago with Murdaugh and Karen?" She didn't answer. So I asked again. "Were you? Who sent you that?" There it was. Not shock. Not denial. A question about the source. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes for 1 second. Just one. "You knew." "Dylan, it wasn't like that." "That is what people say when it was exactly like that." Her voice tightened. "Please don't turn this into something ugly." I looked down at the visitor badge. Visitor. Gray plastic. Cheap clip. One word doing 20 years of talking. It was ugly before I found out. I said. I just wasn't allowed to say so. She started crying then, softly. Once, that would have ended the conversation. I would have apologized for upsetting her. I would have made her pain smaller, so mine could stay invisible. Not this time. I have to go, I said. Dylan, please. I ended the call. For a few minutes, I sat still while the cafe moved around me. Cups clinked. A man laughed at something on his phone. Somewhere behind the counter, bacon hit a grill. Life kept going. That felt rude, somehow. Then another email arrived. Sender, Tylee Kess. Subject, you need to see this. One attachment. Audio file. 14 minutes. Recorded the same day as that transition dinner. I put in my earbuds. My thumb hovered over play. I already knew this would hurt. I pressed it anyway. Murdaugh's voice filled my ears, calm and certain, and within 10 seconds I understood the conspiracy was larger than a stolen bonus. Murdaugh sounded relaxed on the audio. That bothered me more than if he had sounded angry. Anger can be explained. Pressure. Ego. A bad morning. But calm tells you a person had time to think, and still chose what they chose. I sat in that cafe with one earbud in, the other hand resting beside my coffee, and listened to people decide my future, like they were discussing office furniture. Karen spoke first. If we move before vesting, payroll can freeze the payout. Another man asked, are we sure about the timing? Then Murdaugh chuckled. That's why we're doing this now. Someone in the room laughed with him. Not loud, just enough. Enough to tell me they all understood. I paused the file and looked out the window. Across the street, Callaway Meridian Holdings stood bright and clean in the Texas sun. From the outside, it looked like a respectable American company. Family-owned, community-minded, sponsor of charity dinners and Little League banners. Inside, they were talking about cheating a man out of money he had earned. I pressed play again. A woman asked, what about Clause 11C? There was a pause. Short, but heavy. Murdaugh answered, nobody enforces those things. Another voice said, legal reviewed that amendment. They review everything, he replied. Doesn't mean it matters. I replayed that part twice, not because I needed to understand it, because I wanted to remember the exact shape of his arrogance. He knew the clause existed. He knew legal had reviewed it. He just believed rules were decorations for men like him. My phone rang before the recording ended. Aaron, I answered. Tell me you heard it, he said. I heard enough. We issued a legal hold. Tylee is preserving the source file, metadata, calendar logs, everything tied to that meeting. Good. The board has started emergency review procedures. Meredith is involved now. I watched a woman outside wait at the crosswalk with a toddler holding her hand. Ordinary life moving right past mine. Have they calculated exposure? Aaron paused. Preliminary range is between 14 and 15 million. I let that sit. 9 million was what they tried to steal. 14.9 was what arrogance cost when it wore a suit and skipped legal review. Then Aaron's voice lowered. Dylan, listen, they're scared now. And scared executives don't just review paperwork. They review pressure points. My mother. Yes. I looked at the phone without speaking. They may try to frame this as you hurting the family, he said, or damaging the company, or being unreasonable. You know the language. I did. Don't make this ugly. Think about your mother. We can handle this privately. Be the bigger man. Every sentence people use when they want the injured person to stay convenient. I'm not going public, I said. I'm asking for the agreement to be honored. I know, but they're going to act like those are the same thing. After we hung up, I stayed at the cafe long enough for the lunch crowd to thin. I needed a minute before moving again, not to fall apart, to think. At 2:17, my mother called. I almost let it go. Then I answered because some part of me still wanted to hear something decent. Dylan, she said, you need to slow this down. No apology. No. Are you all right? Just slow this down. Mom, they planned it. You don't know how much pressure Murdaugh is under. He called me baggage in front of you. Her breathing changed. He shouldn't have said it that way. That way? You know what I mean. I really don't. She grew quieter. Families forgive. Public fights leave scars. Please, honey, just keep your head down for once. There it was. The family motto, dressed up as advice. Keep your head down. Don't embarrass us. Absorb the blow. Call it peace. I stared at the gray visitor badge lying on the table beside my phone. I had unclipped it without noticing. Keeping my head down never protected me, I said. It protected the people hurting me. She started to say my name, but I ended the call before she could soften the blade. By late afternoon, the sky outside had shifted from bright white to the flat gold that makes Dallas glass towers look expensive and empty. I gathered my papers, saved a backup copy of the recording to my encrypted drive, and forwarded Aaron a note asking that all termination-related files remain under preservation. No emotion in the message, just instruction. At 4:38, another email arrived. Confidential board-level review. Mandatory executive session. Tomorrow morning. Attendance required, including me. I read it once, folded the printed copy, and slipped it into my folder beside the visitor badge. One was paper, one was plastic. Both said the same thing. They had underestimated the wrong man. As I stared at the board summons on the table, I could already feel tomorrow drawing a line through the family and the company, forcing every person involved to choose which side of the truth they were willing to stand on. I slept maybe 2 hours. Not because I was afraid of the board meeting. I had spent half my life in boardrooms. I knew the carpet, the lighting, the fake calm, the little silver pitchers of water nobody touched until somebody started losing. What kept me awake was my mother's voice. Just keep your head down. By 8:40 the next morning, I was back in the lobby of Callaway Meridian Holdings. Same marble floor, same security desk, same receptionist. But this time, people looked. A junior analyst held the door for me and whispered, "Good luck, Mr. Durst," before hurrying away like kindness might get him written up. I still had the gray visitor badge clipped to my jacket. I kept it there on purpose, not because I needed access. Aaron had already cleared me for the board review. I wore it because every person upstairs needed to see what they had reduced me to. A visitor in the company I helped build. The elevator ride to the board floor felt longer than it was. I didn't rehearse a speech. I didn't need one. The truth was already organized in folders, timestamps, recordings, and signatures. Truth does better when you don't dress it up. When I entered the board suite, the room was half full. Murdaugh sat at the head of the table, but he didn't look like the man from Conference Room C. His shoulders were stiff. His jaw moved like he was grinding down words before they escaped. Chandler sat beside him, staring at a legal pad with nothing written on it. My mother sat along the wall, not at the table. That detail said plenty. Meredith Rose stood near the screen with a binder thick enough to make executives nervous. Aaron sat beside her, laptop open, expression steady. Nobody offered coffee. Nobody said, "How are you holding up?" The board chair began. "We're here to review the circumstances surrounding Mr. Durst's termination, the compensation trigger, and potential bad faith exposure." Murdaugh cut in before the sentence fully settled. "This is being blown out of proportion. Dylan is upset. He's taking a family matter and turning it into a corporate threat." There it was. Emotional, family matter, threat. The 3 doors men like him run toward when facts close the other exits. Meredith didn't argue. She just opened the file. First came the termination packet, effective immediately, without cause. Then the vesting calendar, 23 hours and 17 minutes before payout. Then Clause 11C. Then the executive transition plan created 3 weeks earlier. Then the recording. Then the dinner summary with my mother's name sitting there in black and white. The room grew quieter with each document. One board member leaned forward. Another took off his glasses and rubbed his face. A woman near the end of the table looked at Murdaugh like she was seeing him from a new angle and disliked the view. Meredith said, "There is no documented performance issue, no misconduct file, no approved restructuring plan, no legal review before execution. The only consistent factor is the timing of the vesting event." Murdaugh scoffed. "You're making normal business planning sound criminal." "No," Meredith said. "I'm making it sound documented." Aaron clicked to the next file. An old email appeared on the screen. Subject, Dylan, sent from Murdaugh to Chandler 5 years earlier. "Keep him useful. Never let him become powerful." Nobody spoke. I read it once, then again. Some sentences don't shock you. They confirm what your bones knew before your mind accepted it. For almost 20 years, I thought I was climbing. In Murdaugh's mind, I was being contained. I did not look at him. I looked at my mother. Her face had gone pale, not offended, not confused, pale. Because this was not tone, not misunderstanding, not one of those, "you know how he is," comments families use to excuse cruel men at Thanksgiving. These were his words. On record, the board called a short recess. I stepped into the hallway, and for a moment the exhaustion hit me so hard I had to stop beside the windows. Downtown Dallas spread out below, all glass and traffic, and people going somewhere that did not involve being dissected by their own family. Then I heard my name, Dylan. My mother stood a few feet away, hands folded at her waist. "I didn't know it was like that," she said. I asked, "Did you know about the dinner?" She looked down. That was answer enough. Then she whispered, "Please don't destroy what's left of this family." I almost folded. Not because she was right, because some habits are old enough to feel like love. I looked down at the visitor badge. The gray plastic caught the hallway light. Visitor. That word steadied me. "I kept my head down for 20 years, I said. It didn't save this family. It only taught them I would survive anything in silence. Her eyes filled. I didn't move closer. Comforting her had always been the trap. Every time she cried, I became responsible for making the room easier for everyone else. Not today. When we returned, Murdaugh was already talking. Old emails don't reflect present intent. Compensation language is complex. Dylan has always been sensitive about family terminology. Meredith looked at him. "Did you know Mr. Durst's bonus vested tomorrow?" A pause. "Yes." "Did you approve termination without cause?" Another pause. "Yes." "Did you seek legal review before approving it?" This time he said nothing for several seconds. Then, quietly, "No." That single word did more than any speech could have. Meredith turned to the CFO. A printed summary slid across the table. Base bonus, equity acceleration, multiplier, damages, fees, tax implications. Murdaugh reached for it first. His fingers trembled just enough for me to notice. He read the total. The color drained from his face, and I knew the figure had done what my words never could. Murdaugh kept staring at the damage report like the paper had betrayed him. $14.9 million. No one rushed to explain it away. The CFO had already checked the math twice, and Meredith Rowe was not the kind of attorney who put a figure in front of a board unless she was prepared to defend every comma. A board member near the windows finally asked, "Is this exposure valid?" Meredith answered before the CFO could. "Yes. It is supported by the signed compensation agreement, the timing of the termination, the without cause language, and the recorded planning materials." Chandler shifted in his chair. For years, he had watched his father solve problems by pressing harder. Raise his voice. Delay the meeting. Make somebody else carry the blame. But a contract does not get intimidated. The board chair called a temporary recess at 12:36. People stood slowly, like sudden movement might trigger another legal problem. I stepped into a smaller conference room down the hall to get away from the airless tension. I had barely reached the window when the door opened. My mother came in first, then Chandler, then Murdaugh. No lawyers, no board members, no assistants hovering with tablets, just family, or the version of it Murdaugh found useful. He started before the door even closed. "This has gone far enough." I turned from the window. "Has it? You are embarrassing your mother. You are embarrassing this company." That is an interesting way to describe honoring a contract. His lips thinned. "Don't get cute with me, Dylan." Chandler finally spoke. "Maybe we should all take a breath." I looked at him. "You had 3 weeks to take one." That landed. He looked away. Murdaugh pointed toward the boardroom. "You could still stop this." Not "I was wrong." Not "I crossed a line." Just stop this. As if accountability were a faucet I had turned on to inconvenience him. My mother stepped closer, her eyes red. "Maybe we can fix it before it ruins everything." For one tired second, I considered walking away. Not because Murdaugh deserved it, because I was worn out. Tired of being the reasonable one. Tired of translating cruelty into family discomfort. Tired of standing in polished rooms while people asked me to protect the very people who had planned my removal. But fixing something requires truth. They wanted escape. I wanted the record corrected. Those are not the same thing. Before I could answer, Meredith opened the conference room door. Her expression had changed. "We need everyone back in the boardroom." Murdaugh frowned. "We're in the middle of a private conversation." "Not anymore." That quiet sentence moved all of us. When we returned, Aaron was standing beside the screen with a tablet connected to the display. Meredith addressed the board. A supplemental recording was recovered from compliance storage. It appears to be from a virtual executive planning session 6 weeks ago. Murdaugh's attorney sat up. "We haven't reviewed that." "You will," Meredith said. The audio began. At first, it was ordinary corporate talk. Staffing levels, cash flow, forecast timing. Then, someone mentioned my vesting date. A male voice asked, "If he is terminated before the equity event, does that reduce the payout?" Another voice said, "Legal should review that before anything moves." Then Murdaugh answered, "Calm, clear, casual. Then don't ask legal." Nobody moved. The recording continued. He said waiting until after vesting would be expensive. He said involving too many people would complicate the transition. He said the matter needed to be handled quickly and cleanly. Quickly and cleanly. That was what he called it. Not dishonest, not cruel, just clean. When the audio ended, the silence was different from before. It was not confusion, it was recognition. I did not look at Murdaugh. I looked at my mother. She had one hand over her mouth. Tears slipped down her face, but this time they did not pull me toward her. This time they belonged to her. "I didn't know," she whispered. And strangely, I believed her. That hurt in a way I did not expect, because it meant she had not been lying about every detail. She had simply chosen not to look too closely for years. Murdaugh stood so abruptly, his chair scraped the floor. "That recording is incomplete," he said. "You're all hearing fragments without context." Meredith folded her hands. "Then provide the missing context." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out right away. The board chair leaned forward. "Mr. Calloway, did you instruct your team not to consult legal before terminating Mr. Durst?" Murdaugh's face hardened. "I made an executive decision." "No," I said before I could stop myself. "You made a family decision and dressed it up as business." His eyes snapped to mine. "After everything I gave you, you sit there and talk to me like that?" I stood slowly. "You gave me a job. I gave this company almost 20 years. Those are not the same thing." Nobody interrupted. For the first time, I did not feel like I was asking permission to speak. Murdaugh looked around the room and saw it too. The spell was cracking. His title still existed, but the fear around it had started to drain away. Then his attorney leaned toward him and whispered something. Murdaugh listened, nodded once, and sat back down. The attorney reached into his briefcase and placed a sealed folder on the conference table. Meredith's eyes narrowed. The board chair asked, "What is that?" The attorney answered evenly, "Evidence concerning Mr. Durst's conduct that may materially affect this proceeding." The room tightened again. I knew I had not done what they were about to accuse me of. But I also understood something else. Murdaugh was no longer trying to win clean. He was trying to take me down with him. The sealed folder stayed in the center of the table for several seconds before anyone touched it. That was the thing about accusations. Even unopened, they had weight. Murdaugh's outside attorney finally broke the seal and spread the papers across the conference table. Printed emails, expense reports, a memo with my name in bold at the top. He cleared his throat like a man preparing to sound reasonable. These documents raise concerns about whether Mr. Durst used company resources to support his own compensation negotiations. There it was. Greed, conflict of interest, self-dealing. They did not need to prove it right away. They only needed the board to hear it. In a room like that, a stain does damage before anyone finds out whether it is real. I felt every face shift toward me. My mother looked frightened. Chandler looked down. Murdaugh leaned back just enough to pretend he was not enjoying this. For a moment, my chest tightened. Not because I had done anything wrong, because I understood reputation. You can spend decades building one, and a desperate man can try to burn it with 3 printed pages. Meredith Rowe picked up the first document. She did not react, did not gasp, did not give Murdaugh the satisfaction of urgency. She read slowly. Then she asked, "Where did these records originate?" The attorney answered too quickly. Internal systems. Which system? He flipped through the folder. Finance and Executive Administration. Meredith nodded. Which export log? Which archive path? Who pulled them? No answer came right away. Aaron leaned toward her, and she slid him the copies. He opened his laptop, scanned the header information, then requested access to the document history. Murdaugh's attorney objected. "We can provide authenticated copies later." Meredith looked at him over the top of the page. "You introduced them into a board proceeding today. We will examine them today." That was when I saw it. The smallest change in Murdaugh's face. Not fear yet. Irritation. He had expected panic. He had not expected procedure. Aaron projected one email onto the screen. At first glance, it looked ordinary. My name, a budget file, a reference to compensation language. Then Aaron zoomed in. "The creation date does not match the alleged send date," he said. The board chair leaned forward. "Explain that." This format template was not implemented until 8 months after the date shown on the email. The room sharpened. Aaron opened another document. This expense report references an internal project code that did not exist at the time listed. A third file. A fourth. With each one, Murdaugh's clean little story lost another board. The attorney tried to interrupt. "These may be clerical inconsistencies." Meredith's voice stayed even. "Or they may be recently assembled materials represented as historical records." That sentence changed the air. The board chair looked at Murdaugh. "Did you authorize this packet?" Murdaugh did not answer fast enough. And in corporate rooms, delay is its own confession. Aaron kept going. "I cannot authenticate these documents as presented. Not fake. Not yet. Worse for Murdaugh. Unreliable." That meant the board could not use them to question my conduct, but they could use the attempt to question his. During the next recess, I stepped into the hallway just to breathe different air. The sun had dropped lower over downtown Dallas, throwing long strips of gold across the glass walls. Chandler followed me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I thought he was protecting the company." I kept my eyes on the city. Maybe he told himself that. Chandler rubbed his hands together. He looked older than he had that morning. I think he was protecting himself. I turned to him then. All those years, I had seen Chandler as the chosen son, the heir, the man handed every room I had earned my way into. And he was, but that did not mean he was free. Murdaugh's world had damaged both of us. It just paid Chandler while it did it. "I was not trying to take anything from you," I said. He gave a tired laugh. "That's the worst part. I know that now." Before I could answer, Meredith called us back. The board scheduled an emergency vote for the next morning. Compensation exposure, leadership consequences. Governance review. Everything would be decided at once. People began gathering their folders, moving slowly, quietly. The kind of quiet that comes after everyone realizes the old rules no longer work. Murdaugh stopped beside me near the doorway. His voice was low enough that only I could hear. "You think you've won." I looked at him. "I think the truth is catching up." His jaw tightened. Then he smiled. Not warm, not confident, cornered. "You still don't know everything." He walked away before I could ask what he meant. 5 minutes later, as I was waiting near the elevator bank, my phone vibrated. Unknown sender. One attachment. No message. I opened it. The first page was labeled Family Governance Memorandum. 14 years old. At the bottom of the page were 2 signatures, Murdaugh Calloway and my mother's. I did not sleep much that night. The file sat open on my kitchen table until sunrise, surrounded by coffee I barely drank and legal pages I kept reading, even after I understood them. Family Governance Memorandum. That was what they called it. Such a clean name for something so ugly. The document was 14 years old, signed shortly after my mother married Murdaugh. It outlined succession planning, family roles, future leadership, and ownership pathways. Chandler was named the future family successor. That part did not surprise me. Then came my section. Not son, not stakeholder, not future executive, non-lineal dependent obligation. I read those 4 words until they stopped looking like English. Murdaugh had not invented the word baggage in that conference room. He had simply said out loud what the paperwork had been saying for years. But his signature was not the one that kept me sitting there. My mother had signed it too, page after page, initial after initial. At 8:12, she called. "I need to see you before the vote," she said. I almost said no. Then I remembered the boy I used to be, the one who kept waiting for one honest conversation. He deserved at least that much. We met in a small room outside the board suite. I placed the memorandum on the table. She looked at it and folded in on herself. No denial. "No, where did you get this?" "Just recognition." "I thought I was buying a security," she whispered. "At what price?" Her hands trembled. I was scared. Your father was gone. I had debts. Murdaugh had power, and I thought if I signed what he wanted, he would take care of us. "Us?" I asked. "Or you?" That landed hard, but I did not take it back. Tears filled her eyes. "I knew it limited you. I told myself it was just paperwork. That is what everyone says when the paper hurts somebody else." She covered her mouth. For years, I had imagined my mother as trapped, passive, afraid. Maybe she was all of those things, but she had also chosen, and I had lived under that choice. At 9 o'clock, the emergency session began. Every chair was filled. Outside counsel sat along the wall. The CFO had a folder ready. Meredith stood near the display with the calm of a woman who had brought receipts to a house fire. She walked the board through everything: the termination without cause, the vesting window, Clause 11C, the planning documents, the recording, the altered packet from the night before. Each point was clean, methodical, hard to dodge. Murdaugh sat through it with his jaw locked, hands flat on the table. When the board chair gave him a chance to respond, he stood. He looked older, not weak, not yet, but thinner somehow, like the room had taken something from him. "I made difficult decisions for this company," he said. "Leadership is not a popularity contest. Mr. Durst is trying to weaponize technical language because he was disappointed in a business outcome." I almost smiled at that. Disappointed. A word people use when they want betrayal to sound like bad weather. Meredith stayed quiet. That made him push harder. This family gave him opportunity. We gave him a career. None of this would be happening if he had simply known his place. The room froze. Not because it was loud, because it was honest. His place. There it was, stripped clean of legal language and boardroom polish. I looked at the faces around the table. No one rushed to rescue him. No one laughed it off. Even Chandler closed his eyes. The board chair slowly opened my compensation amendment. He tapped the signature page. "Mr. Calloway, your initials appear beside every provision of Clause 11C. Murdaugh said nothing. "Your signature appears on the final approval." Still, nothing. Meredith added. "And your recorded instruction not to consult legal directly undermines your defense." The board went into executive session. 47 minutes. I know because I watched the clock like it owed me something. My mother sat across the hall, silent. Chandler stood by the windows. Nobody tried small talk. There are moments when conversation feels disrespectful to the damage already done. When the doors reopened, we returned to the boardroom. The chair read from a printed decision: full enforcement of Clause 11C, accelerated compensation, contractual damages, total payout, $14.9 million. No applause, no celebration, just consequences. Then came the second decision. Murdaugh Calloway was removed as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately, pending final governance review. The vote was unanimous. Murdaugh did not shout. He did not threaten. That would have required leverage, and for the first time since I had known him, he had none. Security waited near the door, polite but firm. As he passed me, he stopped. For a second, I thought he might say something human. He did not. He only looked at the visitor badge, still clipped to my jacket, then looked away. The elevator doors closed behind him without ceremony. I thought that was the end. Then my mother stepped beside me and placed a sealed envelope in my hand. "I should have given you this years ago," she said. The envelope was plain cream paper, soft at the corners, worn from being handled too many times and delivered too late. My mother held it like it weighed more than the board's decision, more than the payout, More than Murdaugh losing his office upstairs. Maybe it did. I found it years ago, she said. After your father died. My throat tightened at the word father. Not Murdaugh. My father. The man who had taught me how to change a tire, how to shake hands, how to leave a place cleaner than I found it. I opened the envelope in a small conference room no one was using. Inside was a handwritten letter. The moment I saw the slant of the letters, I knew. My dad. The date was from the final weeks of his life. I read slowly. He wrote about work, responsibility, men who confuse control with strength, people who measure your worth by how useful you are to them. Then, near the end, his words stopped me. Dylan, if anyone ever makes you feel like a burden, remember this. You were never baggage. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I had to put the letter down. For 2 days, Murdaugh's sentence had echoed in my head. Just baggage your mother brought with her. Now another sentence answered it. You were never baggage. My mother cried quietly across from me. This time, I let her cry without rushing to rescue her from the discomfort. I should have given it to you, she said. I was afraid if you read it, you'd leave us. I was never really in, I said. She nodded, and that hurt too, because she did not fight it. Over the next hour, she admitted things I had waited half my life to hear. She admitted she chose security when she should have chosen courage. She admitted she saw Murdaugh diminish me, and convinced herself it was temporary. She admitted silence had been easier than confrontation. None of that repaired everything. An apology does not erase years. But truth is still truth, even when it arrives late. A week later, Chandler called. Not about money, not about the company, just to talk. The first few minutes were awkward. We sounded like two men walking through an old house, careful not to step through rotten boards. Then he said, I thought Dad was making me stronger. I think he was just keeping both of us scared. I looked out my apartment window at the Dallas lights and said, he rewarded you and rejected me, but he controlled both of us. Chandler was quiet a long while. Maybe we can start over, he said. Maybe, I answered. Slowly. That was enough. Meredith took me to lunch 2 weeks after the settlement cleared. Halfway through, she said, most people think you won because of the money. I smiled. $14.9 million is hard to ignore. It was evidence, she said. Not the victory. She was right. The real win was watching a room full of powerful people stop pretending I was invisible. 6 months later, life looked nothing like I expected. I accepted a managing partner role at a firm that read contracts before signing them, which became my favorite joke. Aaron left Callaway Meridian and joined a compliance consultancy. Meredith was promoted. The board rebuilt leadership and launched an internal governance review. Murdaugh disappeared from the business pages faster than he would have believed possible. Borrowed power has a short shelf life once fear is gone. On my first day at the new firm, the receptionist handed me a badge. Dylan Durst, managing partner. I stood there a moment longer than necessary. In my briefcase was the old gray visitor badge. I had kept it, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of the day they told me where I belonged. That afternoon, I put the visitor badge in a drawer, not framed, not displayed, just placed away. Some wounds do not need monuments. That evening, I drove to Lake Grapevine with my father's letter folded carefully in my jacket pocket. The sun was low, laying gold across the water, and for the first time in a long while, nobody needed anything from me. No board, no family performance, no man at the head of a table deciding my value. I read the letter once more before tucking it back inside the envelope. Murdaugh's words had never defined me. They revealed him, his blindness, his fear, his smallness. My father's words were the truth. They always had been. The war was over. The contract was paid. The title was gone. The old family story had cracked beyond repair. But I was still standing. Not as baggage, not as a visitor, as myself. And that was the first freedom I had ever truly earned. Have you ever spent years trying to earn approval from someone who never intended to give it? Tell me in the comments. I read every one.